Translation. Therefore, my dear Uddhava, abandon the Vedic mantras as well as the procedures of supplementary Vedic literatures and their positive and negative injunctions. Disregard that which has been heard and that which is to be heard. Simply take shelter of me alone, for I am the Supreme Personality of Godhead, situated within the heart of all conditioned souls. Take shelter of me wholeheartedly, and by my grace be free from fear in all circumstances. Purport. Sri Uddhava inquired from Lord Krishna about the symptoms of saintly persons and liberated souls, and the Lord has replied in terms of different levels of spiritual advancement, distinguishing between those who are able to understand Lord Krishna to be the principal goal of life, and those loving devotees who accept Lord Krishna and devotional service to Him as the only goal of life. Lord Krishna also mentioned that He is captured by His loving devotees and even by those who sincerely associate with His loving devotees. Among all the devotees, the gopis of Vrindavan were described by the Lord as having achieved such a rare state of pure devotional service that Lord Krishna personally feels constantly indebted to them. According to Srila Vishwanatha Chakravarti Thakur, Lord Krishna previously kept the gopis' love for him concealed in his heart because of its confidential nature and the Lord's own gravity. Finally, however, when Lord Krishna could not remain silent about the intense love of the gopis, and thus in these verses the Lord reveals to Uddhava how the gopis loved him in Vrindavan and brought him fully under their control. The Lord would relax in secret places with the loving gopis, and by conjugal spontaneous affection of the greatest love was exchanged by them. The greatest love was exchanged by them. As explained by the Lord in Bhagavad Gita, one cannot achieve the perfection of life merely by renouncing the material world or by executing ordinary sectarian religious principles. One must actually understand the identity of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and by associating with His pure devotees one must learn to love the Lord in His personal, original form. This love may be expressed in either the conjugal, paternal, fraternal or serving rasa or relationship. The Lord has elaborately explained to Uddhava the system of philosophical analysis of the material world, and now He clearly concludes that it is useless for Uddhava to waste time in fruitive activities or mental speculation. Actually, Lord Krishna is hinting that Uddhava should assimilate the example of the gopis and try to advance further in Krishna consciousness by following the footsteps of the cowherd damsels of Vraja. Any conditioned soul who is unsatisfied with the cruel laws of nature, which impose the disease, old age and death, should understand that Lord Krishna can deliver all living beings from the problems of material existence. There is no need to entangle oneself in unauthorized sectarian rituals, injunctions or prohibitions. One should simply surrender to Lord Krishna following the example of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is Lord Krishna Himself. By the authorized, regulated process of Bhakti Yoga, Krishna consciousness, one easily achieves spiritual perfection. Srila Prabhupada ki. Tasmat Tvam Udavosrija Chodanam Pratichodanam Pravritim Cha Nivritim Cha Shrotavyam Shrutameva Cha Mamekam Eva Sharanam Atmanam Sarvadehinam Yahi Sarvatma Bhavena Mayasya Hya Kuto Bayaha. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyeva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Ajanulambita Bhujo Kanakavadatum Sankirtanai Kapitaro Kamalaya-taksha Vishvambaro Dvijavaro Yugadharma Palo Vande Jagat Priyakaro Karunavataram Yantah Pravishya Mama Vacham Imam Prasuptam Sanjeevayada Kila Shakti Darak Svadamna Anyamscha Hasta Charana Shravanat Vagadim Pranannamo Bhagavate Purushaya Tubhyam. So we are continuing to discuss what Saranagati implies, what it means for us. And yesterday we spoke that this is the beginning of spiritual life, this is the foundation of bhakti. And bhakti cannot start without this sense of surrender, sense of acceptance the Lord as our shelter. And we spoke that shelter means exclusive shelter. That ultimately Saranagati implies that we exclusively accept the Lord as our shelter. And we are not trying to find protection in anything else. And that's hard. That's a very difficult proposal. Because being somewhat unchased by nature, we are trying to find solution to our problems in many different places. And therefore, here, Lord Krishna gives his final conclusion to Uddhava, and he explains that this surrender should be exclusive surrender. He says here, Yahi Sarvatma Bhavena, you have to come to me with all your bhava, with all your senses, completely, totally, without any reservations. You have to take shelter of me. And this is how he explains, ultimately, as Hridayananda Maharaj writes in the purport, that how he explains the symptoms of saintly persons and liberated souls. In the beginning of this chapter, Shri Krishna said to Uddhava very interesting things. He said, you can't get me by anything. He gave a long list of different things or different methods which people are trying to employ to come closer to God. And he says that Narodayanti mam yogo na sankyam dharma eva cha na svadhyaya stapastyogo neshta putram na dakshina. Very interesting verse. He says that you cannot control me Narodayanti mam. By yoga, if you do some Iyengar style yoga, no hope. Nasankyam, if you are a philosopher and you're trying to figure out how it works, or you're a scientist, sometimes scientists, they're also eager to get to this cause of all causes by their scientific endeavors. Krishna says, no hope. Dharma eva cha. Even if you're very pious, you're a very nice person, really following all your duties, taking care of your children and wife for a change, and will not help you. Nasvadhyaya, you are very studious. You learn the scriptures and you are, learning all the shlokas and, passing the all possible exams which are there in ISKCON, starting with Bhakta program and ending with Bhakti Sarvabhauma. Krishna says, no chance. Not tapas, not tyago. You may perform austerities, you may fast, you may, give up everything. Na ishtaputram, you may try to also worship ishtaputram, ishtapurtam. You may do different, welfare activities. Moreover, he goes to say that even nadakshina, even if you give charity, if you give some money, that also will not help you. But he says an amazing thing in the end. Yatha varunde satsangah sarva sangapaho himam. He says that the only way to control me, yatha avarunde. Avarunde means basically completely imprison the Lord. Satsangah. Sarva sanga pahohimam. You can do this by satsanga because the satsanga or association with the pure devotees, which is done with the complete total heart, will help you to give up all asatsanga. And asatsanga means basically sanga to our attachments. What Krishna is explaining here, he says here, very important point, which we have to understand by deliberating on the subject matter of surrender, that surrender starts with satsanga or association with the devotees, which helps us to give up all the unwanted attachments and ultimately to give up false ego. This false ego manifests in our attachment to this material world, to different people in this material world, to our relatives and everything else. Krishna, he gives a very interesting equation here. He says, surrender means satsanga. Surrender means if you completely, wholeheartedly associate with the devotees, that means surrender. Because by this very simple process, by this one process, you can achieve everything else. That means surrender, because you're giving up all the bad things, and in this way you can control me. And then Krishna, before coming to this verse which we read, then Krishna gives a long list of different people who were completely, totally uneducated. He of course mentions Hanuman. Hanuman was highly educated, but he was still a monkey. And he says all these different people, he mentions Tuladar, who was a Vaishya somewhere in Allahabad, and he mentions Dharmavyadhi, and Hunter, which was there, and he mentions Gopis, and he mentions Kubja, and he says all these people, countless, and he mentions I think he mentions, whom does he mention? He mentioned long list of people. Vritrasura, Prahlada, Vrishaparva, Bali Maharaj, Banasura, Maya, Vibhishana, Sugriva, Hanuman, Jambavan, Gajendra, Jatayu, Tuladhara, Dharmavyadi, Kubja, Gopis of Vrindavan. And he says they were all, to the most part, were complete dummies. They didn't study Shastras, they didn't perform austerities, nothing special. The only thing, and they all controlled me. He said this Gajendra was not a very learned elephant. He was just an elephant, suffering. But what was common in all of them is this sense of surrender, and the sense of surrender ultimately manifested or dawned on them due to this satsanga, due to holy association. And he goes on glorifying gopis and saying that, if you want to know who is liberated in this world, that's them. They're liberated. And it's a very shocking thing. And, Hridayana Maharaj explains that Krishna, he couldn't conceal it any longer. His love for gopis, he kept mum, he didn't say anything about this for a long time, just before passing away from this world. In his last conversation with Uddhava, he reveals his heart and he says, if you want to know, don't go too far away, all this Sankhya and all this karma yoga and this yoga and that yoga, this is all nonsense. What really counts is this complete surrender which comes to you through satsang. And therefore, and this complete surrender is manifest in case of gopis. So this spirit of Saranagati, it's a very extended process. It starts in the very beginning of our devotion. In the very, very outset, Shri Radha Gokulananda ki jai, Shri Sitaram Lakshman Hanuman ki jai, Shri Gaur Nitai ki jai. It starts with the very first step of our devotion, but it extends completely to the level of gopis. And as Krishna says in these verses, making the conclusion, or therefore he says, tasmat tvam udavasrija chodanam pratichodam. He says, therefore Uddhava, the only good thing which you can do is just to forget about everything else. Just forget what you know, what you have heard, what you are about to hear. He is more or less making jokes of us. He says, you're trying to follow all these rules and regulations, you're trying to study everything, you just want to hear, you just want to have this theoretical knowledge. Forget about this. Just forget about this. And mamekam eva sharanam atmanam sarvadehinam. Just understand that if you want protection, the protection is in me. And he says this very severe, very strong statement. He makes this very strong statement. Yahi sarvatma bhavina mayasya yakuto bayah. If you want to be completely free from all the fear, you have to come to me, Yahi Sarvatma Bhavina, with all your bhav, with all your consciousness. And ultimately that's what surrender means. We come to Krishna with all our consciousness, not with half consciousness, not with 10% of our consciousness, not with 1% of our consciousness. We want to come to Krishna. There is no doubt about it. We're coming to Krishna. We're chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Yeah, very enthusiastic, no problem. what is the percentage of our consciousness in this Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare? Maybe 1%. There is plenty of space on our hard drive to think at the same time about something else. It's no problem. Multitasking, many programs are working at the same time. Google is there, and Folio is there, and everything is there. And of course, chanting is also there. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. But basically by saying that if you want to get rid of all your problems, and the main problem, as we discussed yesterday, the main problem of our material existence is this bhaya, fear. And this fear is all pervading because, whatever fear we have is ultimately the manifestation of the ultimate fear, the fear of death. We may be fearing of economic crisis, we may be fearing of losing our job, we may be fearing of losing our service in the temple, we may be fearing of losing our position, of losing our wife, but ultimately it's all boils down to this fear of death. And that's the problem. That's the problem which we have to tackle. There is no other problem. All other problem is just little small, tiny derivatives from this main problem. And Krishna says there is only one solution. We have only one problem. That's good enough. That's very good news. Because if we think that we have many problems, then it's very complicated task. Krishna says no. This is illusion. You are an illusion, you think you have many problems, therefore you have to try to find many solutions. No, you have only one problem. The problem of false ego. The problem of false identification with matter, which creates fear in your heart. And this fear in your heart creates so many other problems. When you have envy or when you have karma, this is all, again, manifestation of the same problem of fear. What is karma? Karma is lust. And lust means basically you want more and you want to procreate, and that's again because of the fear. Whatever you take, whatever the problem of your life or your psyche you analyze, it ultimately boils down to this one problem, which is fear of death. And Krishna says there's only one problem, congratulations, and there is only one solution to this problem. And this one solution to this problem is to accept me wholeheartedly with full consciousness. Understanding that there is no other solution, there is no other, there is no reason to try to find something else. And that's, basically that's manifested in many stories of this surrender, when people are trying to find some other solutions. Like, Gajendra. We know this Gajendra Moksha Leela. Gajendra was, he was strong. And initially he was hoping to get rid of these clutches of crocodile of death by his own endeavor. And of course, he was probably calling for his wives. He had many wives. He thought the wives will come and save him. But ultimately, when he realized that nobody will save him, and he started praying to the Lord came. And we know, and that's, if we analyze all these stories, the constant feature of this story is that Lord doesn't come till the very end. The Lord is not in a hurry to come to rescue us when we just in case it works, call Him. No. If we just call Him, not wholeheartedly, but with half consciousness, or with little percentage of our consciousness, He doesn't come. He just wants complete, total, 100% surrender. And of course, perhaps the most dramatic story is the story of Draupadi, of surrender of Draupadi. We all know it. Draupadi was trying to find shelter in somebody else. She looked at her husbands. because husbands are natural protectors in Vedic culture, not in the modern culture. In modern culture, policeman is the ultimate protector. But in Vedic culture, husbands are the ultimate protectors. And she had good husbands, not the useless Kali Yuga husbands. she had real good husbands. 5, not one, 5. One stronger than another. Bhim, Arjun, Yudhishthir, she was looking for protection. Somebody is trying to disrobe me in front of all these, people. And they just looked down, Of course, Bhima didn't look down, but he couldn't do anything either. He was boiling inside, but he couldn't do anything either. Then she was trying to find some shelter in Bhishma, in Drona, and they were all capable to give her protection. The most amazing thing is that they were capable to give her protection. Yudhishthir, Arjun, Bhima, Nakula, they were capable. If Bhima would try to smash this Dukshasana, it's just Bhima would not even try hard to deal with this guy. He would just probably do like this. Dukshasana would fly away. But no, didn't work. Bhishma could protect her. It was very easy for Bhishma. Bhishma didn't even have to blow at Dukshasana. Bhishma should have just said one word, no, stop it. That would be enough. They would stop because he had such a power and authority, and she was coming and looking with the eyes full of tears, save me. And he said, no, not this time. No, I can't do anything. I can't do anything. And then ultimately she was trying to protect herself. When all these things didn't work, she was trying to hold for her sari. Didn't work either. She was trying to just put her teeth in the sari. Didn't work. She knew she's losing. And they said that, she started to calling the Lord with one hand raised, and with the other hand she was holding for the sari. Krishna didn't appear. She said, no, just Sarva Bhavina. If you want to come to me, you have to come wholeheartedly with 100%. And then she realized no hope. And she just raised both of her hands and she said, Krishna, Govinda. And immediately the Lord appeared. She said, oh yeah, now I'm here. I'm here for you. What do you want? He took the form of your sari. And basically, that's what surrender means. I was trying to explain this yesterday. Even though it may be, protracted, done over a protracted period of time, it may be, it may be a gradual process, this and that. That's good. But ultimately we have to understand what it has to bring us to. It has to bring us to complete surrender. Complete surrender means that my whole bhav is there with the Lord. My whole consciousness is with Him. And when I chant His holy name, I mean it. It's not that I chant His holy name and then He comes and I say, no, I didn't mean it. You just leave me alone. I want to be alone. So that's what surrender means, and that's what Krishna means when He says, just forget about all the other religions, forget about everything else, forget it. Just come to me immediately. As a byproduct of it, you will become fearless. Even though Krishna says that if you surrender unto me, Masuchaha, don't worry about this, aham tvam sarva papibhyo. But the point is that when somebody surrendered, there is no sin for him. It's funny because Krishna is ultimately not saying the complete truth. When he says, Sarva dharman parityaja mamekam sharanam raja aham tvam sarva papivyo moksha shyami mashuchaha. It looks like, it sounds like he says, you surrender unto me and then I will take care of your sins. But basically, there is no need for him to take care of our sins because there is no sins as soon as we surrender. The sins is for the false ego. As long as we maintain this false ego, false independence, then the sins are. When there is no false independence, there is no sins. Krishna doesn't have to protect us from the sins because there is no sins. You're already free at the moment of surrender. Therefore, it is said that when somebody, surrenders during the initiation ceremony, by the way, then there is no sin for him. That's it. There is no sin because he surrendered. Initiation means surrender. Initiation means Saranagati. I take the complete shelter of it. I am not independent anymore. I relinquish my independence completely, and therefore there is no sin for me. And there is no fear. Masuchaha. There is no fear. Again, it's not that Krishna has to make a special arrangement to give us this state of our consciousness where there is no fear. There will be no fear. By the act of surrender. It's the same, it's synonymous. It's when you say surrender, it's tantamount of being free of all fear. And that's what it means. But it's hard to do because it means death of our ego. And that's very difficult. It's such a seemingly easy process. And Krishna says that's the only process which works. That's the only process of liberation. But why it is so difficult? Because, my ego doesn't want to die. Even though we know that ego will die. Ego dies again and again and again. We don't die. Soul doesn't die. What dies? Ego dies. The death is the agony of ego. The ego is just, but if we understand this process, that's why it's difficult. There is a resistance from the ego part, from the part of our ego to die. It doesn't want to die. Therefore, surrender means to die before death. Therefore, Diksha or initiation is called second birth because you're born again completely. Your mental frame is totally different. You're surrendered. You belong to God. You're not independent anymore. And therefore, also, when this surrender is taking place, that's a significant step forward. Why it is so much stressed in Srimad Bhagavatam, Ante Narayana Smritih, that if you remember about God at the moment of death, why it is so important? Why it is any way different from remembering about God during your lifetime. It is different. Because at the moment of death, you're completely, totally helpless. And if at this moment you remember about God, you will remember Him without any ego. At this moment, your ego is dying. There's no ego. You're helpless. Just imagine, yesterday Bhakti Rasamrit Maharaj gave this example. You are a very powerful, egoistic, selfish person. You keep everything under your control. Everything is pakka. You know how to control this environment, and then you're just taking, expensive business class ticket in a plane, and you feel very safe there, and then all of a sudden the pilot, gives a very frantic announcement. That's it. They're going down. If at this moment you happen to remember about the Lord, it will be with all your above. Believe me. Those people who went through this, were in this near-death experience of, crash, they say it was a very good round which I chanted at that time. It was very attentive round. There was no problem with my mind, going here and there. And that's what surrender means. And surrender means, again, surrender means the death of our ego. And as Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj says, repeating Hegel, you have to die before death. It means your ego has to die. And when the ego dies, then Krishna accepts you. And for us it's difficult, right? Death is always difficult. There is no easy death. Only for completely pure devotees the death is totally easy. They don't notice it. For us it's such a drama. Why? Because we're attached. Bhakti Rakshak Siddhar Maharaj, he gave a beautiful example of this. He mentions the fable of Aesop. He says there was a fable about the frogs who were playing. Frogs, the frogs are jumping and they're playing. It was a springtime and they're playing and playing. And then, the boys came and the same forest clearing where the frogs were jumping and playing and croaking. And the boys also started playing. And how they played? They saw these frogs and they started throwing stones in these frogs. That was their play. And, and then one of the frogs said, for you, it's a play. And for us, it's death. So, did you get it? That's about our life. For him, it's a play. For us, it's death. Krishna is playing, but what he wants us to do by this play, he wants us to die. He does want us to die. He did create this world with all the miseries and all the problems. And out of all the problems, the most serious problem, the problem of death, because he wants ultimately to play with us. And he knows there is no other way to play with us unless we die. In this purport, Hridayananda Maharaj says this, that when somebody realizes this problem, any conditioned soul who is unsatisfied with the cruel laws of nature which impose disease, old age, death, should understand that Lord Krishna can deliver all living beings from the problems of material existence. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada, he gave a very amazing also explanation of this. He said that sometimes people ask this eternal question: why God is so cruel? Why did he create this world with so much miseries in this world? And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada says there is only one explanation to this. And this is explained in a shloka of Srimad Bhagavatam. Tattenu kampasu samikshamana bunjana evatma kritam vipakam hridvak vapubir vidadam namasti. Yomuktipade sadaya bhak. Yeah, so Jiveta Yomuktipade sadaya bhak. He says, and he explained how this shloka, because if you know the translation of this shloka, seemingly there is no connection between the creation of God, who created this world so miserable, and this shloka. But there is. And he says, when people suffer in this world, in the sufferings, or in this feeling of incompleteness which is there in this world, which everyone feels, there is some vague, weak feeling of God, of desire to come to God. And then he says, when this feeling, or when this bhav, desire to come to God, becomes very strong and prominent due to these sufferings, then all the problems are solved. And this very moment. And this verse says, Tatenu kampam susamikṣamana bunjana evatma kritam vipakam. If I have exclusive hope, susamikṣamana, if I have this exclusive hope for anukampa, for the compassion of the Lord, and in the meantime, bunjana evatma kritam vipakam, I don't really care about all the sufferings which are there, I just tolerate them. And I express my gratitude by my words, by my actions, by my body, by everything which is there. Hridvakva pubir vidadhan namaste. By my mind. If I express my gratitude and I bow down, I surrender to the Lord. And jiveta yo muktipade sadayavak. You already liberated. There is no problem. So that's basically the beginning, the surrender, which is the beginning of bhakti, beginning of devotional service. Therefore it is said that devotional service starts on a liberated platform. Surrender means liberation. And only after that, mad bhaktim labate param. After liberation you can serve the Lord. Before that you cannot serve the Lord. So this surrender is the background of devotional service. And of course, in our case it may be a complicated process, but ultimately it's simple. And then Srila Jiva Goswami explaining this, he of course quotes the verse from Vaishnava Tantra, from Tantric literature, from Pancharatna. Anukulyasya sankalpah pratikulyasya varajanam rakshishati vishvaso goptritve varanam tatha atmanikshepa karpanye shadvidha saranagati. He gives this quote and starts explaining this quote, what it means to surrender. That surrender has 6 angas. And he says among the 6 angas, 5 are angas, or parts. And the 6th one is angi, or the whole. He says that the whole among the 6 angas of surrender is goptritve varanatata. So what this goptritve varanam tatha, when we come to the Lord with asking Him for protection, for ultimate protection, when varanam means we accept Him as our protector. Goptritve varanam tatha. When we come to Him and we completely accept that He is the protector and nobody else, then the surrender is complete and it manifests in other different parts. But as I said, even though the surrender means complete surrender ultimately, and we have to really understand that we will have to come to this point of complete surrender, then we can see even from this description that it may be in our reality, in reality of our heart, is a gradual process. It may be a gradual process. So, anukulyasya sankalpa, first you accept something favorable, then you reject something which is unfavorable. And it may take a long time before you reject something which is unfavorable, which is against the very grain of devotion. Usually you start surrender from accepting something which is favorable, and this is the beginning. Actually, there is a nice, you can see it, it's very nicely illustrated by Vibhishan, by his surrender. Vibhishan is a very graphic illustration, his story is a very graphic illustration of this gradual process of surrender. He was a demon. And perhaps it was, it's, some similarities is there between him and us in this regard. And it was difficult for him to surrender completely. So first thing which he did, when Lord Brahma came to fulfill the desires of this Kumbhakarna and Ravana and Vibhishan, and Kara and Shurpanaka, they were very austere demons. They were doing a lot of austerities there, severe austerities. And he came to Ravan, and Ravan asked him, that he would not be killed by anyone. And then he came to Kumbhakarna, and Kumbhakarna said the same thing, Nityatvam. And of course, demigods were so afraid that they asked Saraswati to come into his tongue, and instead of Nityatvam, he said Nidratvam. He said, Tatastu, just sleep peacefully, don't worry about this. You will sleep for a long time. And then again they came to Shurpanaka, and Shurpanaka said, I want to take any form and shape at my desire. And then they came to Vibhishan, and Vibhishan said, I want only love for God. I don't want anything else. And that was his first step of surrender, which is very relevant to us. And I'm sure that was a very theoretical thing at this moment of Vibhishan's devotional career. In the beginning, when we come to devotional service, we understand more or less theoretically that's Lord is what we need, is whom we need. We don't need anyone else. And how you get the Lord? By love. So that's Anukulyasya Sankalpa. Anukulyasya Sankalpa. Sankalpa means resolve. You have the determination or resolution, I want to accept only something which is favorable towards devotional service, or only something which is liked by the Lord. And then, if we take Vibhishan further, it took him a long, many years of sadhana before he rejected his bad association. Just imagine, he was attached. He was attached to Ravana. Even though he was trying to surrender to the Lord, it took him many years. He was still there, and he was coming to the palace, and he was giving advice, and he was trying to reason. But at the same time, half of his heart was with Ravana, not with the Lord. And ultimately, when Ravana said, you just silly, just before the battle started, when this whole invasion of the monkey army went to Lanka, just before that, Vibhishana was again and again trying to reason him, and said, you're keeping Sita. You're keeping Sita in your palace. It's the same as keeping poisonous snake in your palace. Since the day Sita was brought by you, there are so many bad omens, just get rid of her. He was not saying she's a goddess of fortune, just worship her. He said, just get rid of her. He was not yet fully surrendered. But when Ravan said that you just stupid and you are just against me or something like this, he realized there is no hope. So he gave up. Pratikulasya Varjanam. And that's a difficult process. We can also see in this example that there is a certain dynamic in this process. It took him a long time before he rejected unfavorable, after accepting something favorable. But after that, it became pretty quick, the whole thing. So the next point of surrender, the next item of surrender, or the next anga of surrender, is Rakshishya Titi Vishwas, the trust. When you reject unfavorable things, and before you reject unfavorable things, it's really difficult to develop this trust that the Lord will protect me. Because usually we maintain attachment to all these unfavorable things, because these unfavorable things also give me some sense of protection, some sense of shelter. Why people attach to wife, to family life? Because it gives some sense of shelter. They protect me. Even in the third canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, it is said that the wife is a fort. The family life is a fort for me. So why people attach to drugs? Again, because drugs give some sense of shelter, some sense of protection. Protection from my, depression, from my moods and everything. Why people attach to, any vodka or whatever, it's the same thing. Or they take shelter in cigarettes. So before you give up the negative things, the things which are unfavorable, you will not be able to understand that the Lord is the shelter. You will not be able to develop this trust. The next thing is trust, Vishwas. Goptritve Varanam, not Goptritve Varanam. Rakshishya Titi Vishwas, so trust. And then it is said that when Vibhishana went out from the palace, it kind of dawned on him. He said, why am I trying to be with this guy? Why am I trying to take shelter where there is no shelter? My shelter is the Lord. And at this moment, this Vishwas appeared in him. And when Vishwas appeared in him, he just took 4 of his associates, or 3 of his associates, and they flew up in the sky. This actually, when you realize that the Lord is protection, it gives you such a boost of enthusiasm. You feel like flying up. It's definitely like this. I remember we all went through it. When there was this initial kind of enthusiasm of surrender, you were not walking on the ground. You were flying somewhere up. Great, yes. Yes, there is somebody who will protect me from everything else. And the same happened with Vibhishana. He flew high up in the sky with his associates, with his demons, who also happened to be devotees. And then they came. For 1 hour they were flying in the sky, and they came to the place where the army of Ram was there. And the first one whom they saw was Sugriva. And Sugriva saw these demons, and he said, just kill them. Immediately kill them. What they're doing here, just, they're spies. And there was a very, very vivid discussion between the monkeys what to do with them. And they're still, just in case, they're still up in the sky a little bit. So the monkey are discussing what to do with them, but they're not, Vibhishana is not really landing so much. And then they went to Ram, and of course Hanuman, he was saying, I just, he's a demon, but I look at his face, and there are some signs of his devotion, so just accept him. So there was it's a long discussion how they discussed what to do with them. But most of the monkeys said either kill them or just guard them very carefully and use them and then kill them. Or imprison them or whatever. And then they came to Ram. And when they saw Ram, and that's the first time when Vibhishan saw Ram. Vibhishan saw Ram. At this moment, Goptritve Varanam, he said, I am yours. Goptritve varanam tatha. Varanam means accept. First you have trust, and that's a little difference. Varanam means you really in reality accept him as the protector. And then we know when Ram heard everyone, he smiled and he said, Sakriteva prapannayah tavasmiti sayachate. Even if a person wants Sakriteva prapannayah, once surrender and says Tavasmiti sayachate, and in a very, sincere voice he says, I'm yours. Tavasmiti sayachate. Abhayam sarvada tasmai. Immediately I give him complete protection, sarvada, in all the circumstances. What is this? Vratam mama. This is my vrata. This is my promise. And when Sugriva heard this, and Sugriva was the greatest enemy of this decision, he was against this. When Sugriva heard this, he started crying. He said, now I understand, my Lord, who you are. You're right. This is the only right decision. And at this moment of time when, you can imagine what Vibhishana felt. At this moment of time, Vibhishana started crying also. Lord Ram probably was also crying, saying this. They all started crying. And in complete surrender, Vibhishana at that moment, he completely came down to the earth and fall flat in front of Lord Ram. And that's Atmanikshepa. That's surrender, complete surrender. And then Karpanya, when you do this Atmanikshepa, you feel very humble at the same time. So it was the process. What I mean to say is that if we analyze these verses from the Tantra, from Pancharatna, we see that it may be a process in our case. But ultimately, we have to come to this point when we accept the Lord as, when we really accept the Lord as our everything, from whom everything comes. The example which is given in Vaishnava literature is Chataka bird. Chataka bird is the bird which wants water, but she only wants water. He only wants water from the cloud, not from the mud. So, and to get this water from the clouds, is ready to take the thunderbolt. No problem, as long as it is coming from the clouds. So, Goptritve Varanam, this Angi, as Jiva Goswami explains, the complete whole is that when we're ready to accept the Lord as our everything, from whom everything comes, and it basically means that whatever bad is happening to us, whatever good is happening to us, it's fine. It's absolutely fine with us because we know He is the protector. Even if He sends something which is seemingly unfavorable, this seemingly unfavorable things is of no consequences for us because we know it's coming from the Lord. He is the source of everything. Accepting Him means to understand that whatever happens, it happens because of His will. And this is the most important understanding which has to be there. And it's also interesting, very interesting, if we again analyze these verses, that I will say few more words. There is a lot more to say, but I will only say a few more things. If we analyze these 6 items of surrender, we can clearly see a certain pattern in them. We can see that these first 2 items, acceptance and rejectance, sankalpa and pratikulya varjanam, is related to our mind. Because the main function of the mind is what? Accept and reject, right? Sankalpa and vikalpa, here is sankalpa and varjanam, the same thing. And we have 3 faculties, 3 main mental faculties. Manas, mind, which is accepting and rejecting. I like something, I don't like something else. So first sign of surrender is that it's not me who decides what is good, what is bad. For my mind, I program my mind in a certain way, that is, it is the Lord. I accept what the Lord accepts as good, and I reject what the Lord rejects as bad. I accept His will over my will, or His mind over my mind. And that's the mind. And then intelligence is there, buddhi. And buddhi is the faculty, the mental faculty, which helps us to create plans and to understand where we get things, how to get things, how to be successful, how to protect ourselves. And therefore, two second items, the second pair of items, is related to buddhi, to our intelligence. Through our intelligence, we have to accept Lord as the protector. And there is no other way. It's the action of intelligence. The surrender is not the action of blind kind of fanatic shaheed who is just one, who is doing this. No, it's crazy. The act of surrender is through buddhi, through intelligence, through mind, through intelligence, and through ego. And there are different things of this. There was a very interesting story, short story, just 1 minute, about Prabhupada. There was, in one temple in America, this philosophy of complete surrender was very prevalent. And devotees, especially among the Sankirtan devotees, whatever stupid things they would do, they would say, probably Krishna wanted us to do this. They are completely, totally surrendered souls. They would go to Sankirtan and they somehow or other forgot to put books. And they said, oh, it means that Krishna wants us to chant Hare Krishna. That's no problem. They would forget to put the fuel, the gas into the tanks and say, oh, Krishna wanted us to forget about this, The car would stand somewhere there, in the middle. And the leader, the Sankirtan leader, didn't like this philosophy so much. Somehow or other, it didn't feel right to him. But he didn't, he wanted to ask Prabhupada, but he didn't know how to ask Prabhupada. So he wrote a letter to Prabhupada, and he asked Prabhupada, Dear Srila Prabhupada, can you please explain to us what it means to surrender? He didn't want to go into details, but he just asked, can you explain to us what it means to surrender? And Prabhupada, he could see through the whole thing. His answer was very simple. He said, surrender means to use God-given intelligence. So, what I mean to say is that the angi of surrender, the main item of surrender, which constitutes the complete whole of surrender, is the action of intelligence, of buddhi. You accept the Lord, that you understand by your intelligence that whatever comes to you ultimately is coming from one source, that is the Lord. Whatever good, whatever bad, whatever you need is coming from Him. Therefore, why not take complete shelter of Him? And then the third pair of this limbs of Saranagati is clearly related to our ego. Atmanikshepa karpanya goptritveva. Atmanikshepa karpanya. So that's ego. So basically, what it means by surrender, by explaining the surrender in this way, Vaishnava Acharyas, they explain that this is a complete change of our mentality. Surrender means we change our mind by taking a totally different set of criteria, what is good, what is bad. Surrender means we change our buddhi, intelligence, and instead of relying upon ourselves and upon our intelligence, by intelligence we rely upon the Lord. Rely upon His goodwill and understand that whatever He sends for our good. It's ultimately for our good. And the last one, we completely change our ego. Instead of being independent, instead of maintaining and trying to protect our independence in this world, we say, no, I'm totally dependent part and parcel of the Lord. I am His. I belong to Him. I always a part of Him. I'm connected with Him. And my happiness can only be there if He is happy with me. My happiness means His happiness, and I have to take care of His happiness, not about my happiness. And that means surrender. And then there is still this section of Bhakti Sandarbha which I am trying to explain, goes on for more details of surrender, but just this general of understanding I wanted to give. And maybe perhaps on Wednesday we can also finish this. Let's see how it goes, if it works. But that's the overview of these 6 limbs of surrender. And one important thing, simple but very important thing, is that Srila Jiva Goswami, by explaining the 6 limbs of surrender, he says that this Anukulyasya Sankalpa Pratikulyasya Varjanam Rakshishati Vishwasogo Tritvevaranam Tatha, especially Anukulyasya Sankalpa Pratikulyasya Varjanam, is not only in relation to God, it's also in relation to devotees. And everything which is connected with God. It means that we accept everything which is favorable, or do something which is favorable towards devotees, not only towards the Lord. We try to serve, we try to please the devotees. And we reject from our life completely, totally, without any reservation, everything which is unfavorable towards the devotees of the Lord. We're afraid to displease them, we're afraid to do something which is pratikul, which is not pleasing to them, which is not pleasing to the Lord, to devotees, to temple, to organization, ISKCON, which is also something which is very closely connected with the Lord. This is all tadiyas, this is all paraphernalias of the Lord. So this anukul and pratikul is not only in regard to the Lord Himself, but in regard to everything which is connected with the Lord. Tulasi, Devi, the temple of the Lord, the devotees of the Lord, all the paraphernalia of the Lord. And that's our first significant step to surrender our independent will, which culminates in surrendering completely our ego, and then this feeling of complete protection and fearlessness. Okay, thank you very much.